Thank you very much. I'm not a technical person, so this is going to be a little bit more simple presentation. What I want to talk about something is part of this big idea around building a quality culture. But one of the ideas I'd like to try and promote this afternoon is something very practical. To try and take a very big problem down to something very specific, something which everybody here, all of us can do as individuals. How can we make a difference? Some of the topics that get talked about are very big topics. It's technical, it's chemical, it's labeling, legal. Some of it's even political. But what I'd like to try and leave at the end of the next 15 minutes or so is things which are very practical and very personal. Just to get started, the bit of introduction. I work for a company called Damin. Damin is a Chinese company. It has an investment from an English company called Swire. Some of you may be familiar with the Swire Group. It's from Hong Kong. Swire Group is fairly large, but it has a part of it which is privately owned by the Swire family, which is an old tea business. And the tea business is called Finley's, and has tea plantations in parts of Africa and in Sri Lanka. And several years ago, we took an investment into a company called Damin, which is a very large tea producer in China. None of you would have heard of Damin, and probably most of you have never heard of Finley's. But I'm pretty sure that all of you have drunk one of our products. We have no brands, but we supply to brand owners. So, for example, if you drink, if you're in Hong Kong, let's see, what would you drink? If you drink a Vitasoy lemon tea, if you drink a Nestea lemon tea, if you drink a Wanglao Ji, if you drink Kang Shifu, Tongyi, if you drink a ready-to-drink tea, the chances are you have a part of that product, the tea part of that product comes from us. So what we do is we buy very large quantities of tea from all around the world, a lot of it in China. We extract it, so it's boiling it up on a big level. We then take out the tea part of it and blend it to meet the preferred taste of that brand owner, and then we ship it to their bottling plants. So we're the world's largest extract producer, with the pardon me, the third largest plant extract producer, because if you think about it, some teas are not actually teas. So if you have a herbal tea, that doesn't actually, in a Chinese sense, a herbal tea, liang cha, has no tea plant in it. Liang cha is plant extract. It's from grass, 小骨草, 仙草, and flowers, 菊花, 金花, stuff like that, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So, Wanglao Ji is not actually a real tea. It's called a herbal tea in Chinese. So we do that as well. We do the plant extract bit. We have pretty big R&D facility, probably small relative to some of the other players here. We have about 60 or 70 people in our R&D facility. We work very closely with brand owners to source ingredients and then formulate for their desired brand. We're based in Fujian, which is a big tea growing area. And like I said, this is it has an investment from Finley's, which is part of the Swire Group. It's privately owned by the Swire family. I've worked for Swire for 21 years or so. Prior to doing tea, I was actually in Swire Coca-Cola, so also doing beverages. So that's how I got to meet Anna several years ago, and some of my colleagues are here, ex-colleagues are here too. So I was the COO of Swire Beverages. We were running Coke operations in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and parts of the US. So I'm not a chemist, and I'm not a technical guy. I'm a kind of a beverage person from a management angle. Some of you are probably familiar with Swire. Finley's itself is a very old company. It started in 1750. Quite a long tea history. So what I'd like to talk about today, though, is about building a quality culture. And quality is a very abstract topic. It's very difficult to define quality sometimes. You kind of know it if you see it, but if you have to sit down and give a definition of it, it can be quite difficult. So how do I think about quality? I think about it in a very simple term, and that is about building trust, about building consumer trust. And everything which we try and do when we're talking about building product quality is really for the objective of satisfying the consumer so that they trust what they're having. Not that much more complicated than that. And these days it's actually very complicated to actually do. I mean, the global supply chains we have are incredibly complex. I mean, listening to Jeff's presentation just now, I mean, that is an incredibly tough management challenge to manage supply chains on that kind of level. And at the end of the day, it's an interaction between a consumer, such as this, a mother who is concerned about what her child is eating or drinking. And these days, in some senses, it's a bit like this picture. The labels are not big enough. There are so many things we need to be talking about in terms of what we want to know about the product, that it's either the labels are not big enough, or maybe it's my eyesight which is getting too old, because I can't read most of the labels these days. But what people are looking for is reassurance. They want to trust what they're eating, and they trust what they're drinking. And they want to trust what they're giving to their kids and to their other family members. And how do we do that? How do we build that level of trust? All the things which we're talking about in terms of legal issues or chemical testing, residue testing, is around trust, essentially. Consumers not too worried about too much fancy stuff. We're just trying to get to where the trust is. How did we get here? Why do we have so many trust issues? If you try and summarize it as a story, I'd say it's a story of the evolution of the food supply chain. If we go back, not so long ago, if we go back a few generations, this wasn't really a big issue. In my grandparents' generation, they used to grow their own vegetables, and they lived next to a farm where you have cattle, and you'd go there to get milk. And pretty much everything you needed food-wise was in your community. It was very localized. And people took far more responsibility, probably take far more responsibility, if there is a direct connection between producer and consumer. And we see that, even today. But what has happened over the years, as we've industrialized the food business, is that those links between the producer and the consumer have just got further and further apart. They've got wider and wider. So we started to enter the middle territory of this, which is where we are at present, where in most cases the consumer doesn't know who the producer is. You may know a company, but behind that company we have these very complex supply chains. And the example I gave at the beginning about tea is a great example. I spend all my working life making sure that the tea we make for the customers you've heard of is good tea and is good quality tea, but you've never heard of my company. So there are very, very big removes between the consumer and the producer. And as a result of that, maybe we've lost something. As a result of the distance between the producer and the consumer, maybe we've lost this sense of pride and ownership of what people are doing. We've disconnected the input part of people's work from the output part of where the consumer is consuming it. Maybe we also have an opportunity to solve this. It's impossible, I think, or very difficult to go backwards. We can't go backwards to where we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago and all go back to farming our own vegetables. We're in this middle state now, and we know that we can't stay where we are because we have these trust issues. And we really only have one choice, and that's to go forwards. And how do we go forwards? It's because of the sort of some of the areas which all of us, I think, in the audience are working on in different ways. And people like Anna are doing fantastic jobs. It's in terms of connectivity. How do we reconnect the industrial world with the same level of connectivity that we had in the traditional world? How do you get to a stage that when we pick up let's say a beverage, we can find out absolutely everything about it? The example that Jeff gave was a perfect example. To have that kind of transparency. You certainly wouldn't be able to put it on a label, but technology may allow us to do that with things like QR codes. If people really want to know where is the PET from, which goes into the PET resin, what other ingredients are in here apart from water, what's in the label, if people want to know onto that kind of detail, right down to batches and source of where was the oil from or whatever like that, if people really want to know. Technically, it is actually possible to do that. The technology around that is already there, but there's a lot of political things and investment things which need to happen in order to reconnect it. That, I think, will take several generations to do, but it's got to be the way forward, because we can't, like I said, we can't stay where we are now. That's a really big topic. And it's actually a very scary topic. I find that, it's difficult imagining all the work around that. It's very complicated, technical, data standards, all these different things. It's a complicated topic. If we look across the whole value chain, and every supply chain conference always has a slide like this, with the producer go right down to the consumer. It's a very complicated supply chain we're talking about. Trying to connect all of the dots for every raw material and every process material and every action going through that supply chain and digitizing it and linking it all together is a very, very tough challenge. It's a very tough challenge. But that's what we're trying to get towards. We're trying to ensure quality and security around that supply chain. This idea around transparency and traceability, the kind of things that we have with GS1 and the data standards, that's a key part. The industry and regional bodies, which help facilitate all businesses, not just small businesses, but all businesses, even the larger ones, because everybody needs help to do this together. Technology and processes around that. And finally, data standards. If we want it all to connect, I've been over the 20 years or so, occasionally been involved in IT projects. And when you start getting involved in connections across companies or between business units or things like that, normally the CEO has this grand strategy and then says, this is what's going to happen. And he then leaves the room and you get some technical guys in. The first thing you find out is the data standards are different. So it can be, data standards is probably one of the most boring topics in the world, yet one of the most important, especially for the kind of thing which we've been talking about. Now let's take a very different angle on this. What I want to try and finish off by is, we've just been floating around at the 30,000 feet level of the problem. What I'd like to try and do is flip it around, to look at the micro level, look at the personal level, and look at the practical level. And that is what can we do? What can we do as individuals or advocates to try and make this happen? There's a great book, I'm not sure if anybody here has read it, there's a great book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. You read it? It's a fantastic book. It's a bit kind of whatever it was, 1970s when it was written, but it is so true, so much of it is really, really relevant to the quality business. There are whole chapters, not chapters quite, there are pages talking about what is quality. And it's about values, it's about personal values. And there's one sentence which I think picks it up brilliantly in the book, and it says, the place to improve the world is in one's own heart and head and hands. And if you want anything big to happen to change the world, it's got to start with individuals and to motivate them through their head and their heart and their hands. And it's as practical as that. It comes down to a very, very individual level. None of the technical stuff, chemical analysis, labeling laws, all this stuff, none of this will happen unless you have passionate individuals who want to go and make it happen. Building the quality in the individual and inspiring individuals to make a difference, to realize the importance of making a difference, is going to change it. There is a lot of hard work and there's a lot of boring stuff to do. The only way we can do it is to incite that passion amongst people. And building quality in the relationships between individuals. So that we're not just working individually with a quality or a value mindset, but we promote that with the people we're interacting with, inside our companies and then across companies. What I'd like to sort of promote for today is the idea actually that we can all become advocates of change. All of us here, in our respective companies and our respective departments and our respective roles, can make a difference. And even if we're not chemists and not labeling experts or not data standards experts, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If we can make a commitment ourselves that we want to build a quality product, we want to ensure that our kids are having a healthier life, then that is a simple place to start. And actually it can be very practical. So my takeaway what I'd like to leave with people is just 3 practical questions. If you really want to make a change, then how can you promote this idea in other parts of your organization or with people around you or in your community? And I've tried this a number of times over the years to try and do this with the teams I've worked with, is asking 3 very simple questions. First one is, how would you act if everything you made was consumed by your children? But let's not just talk about quality as a hypothetical concept, just say, look, would you do the same thing? Or would you use that ingredient? Or would you use that manufacturing process? Or would you leave that mess on the floor if what you're just about to produce was being consumed by your kids? I think deep down, that triggers something. The other question is, how would you act if everything you did was seen by your family? Occasionally people, certainly in business life, are doing things which, if you put them on the front page of a newspaper and their whole community finds out about it, they may ask themselves twice before doing it. So this is kind of a trigger point. And then the final question is, if you cannot help to lead the change today and engage and commit to be part of that change, then who can? We are industry experts in different respective fields, and we know more about this subject, I suspect, about the food quality subject, than most other people in Hong Kong today. We have a good representation from industry. If we want Hong Kong to change and parts of China to change and parts of Asia to change, who better to do that than the people in the room today? So it's a very simple message. I'd say that Hong Kong needs you, Asia needs you, and actually the global food supply chain needs you. Very much.